What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Figures of Sport podcast. And we're on episode 30. This is episode 30, and I wanted to wait a little bit, and I also want to apologize at the same time. But I wanted to wait just a little bit because I wanted to do a video again, and I just didn't want to use the old studio setup. I wanted to wait until we were able to get everything for our new studio setup. And got to get the logo. The flag is coming soon. We will have our centerpiece flag very soon. Definitely had to get the shoes for today's episode. And the next, probably some of the other upcoming episodes, but it's got to be the shoes. You guys know what that means. We are talking about The Last Dance. In this episode, we are going to be talking about episodes 3, 4, and 5. I'm splitting up, even though we are behind. The last episode I did on The Last Dance was about episodes 1 and 2. This episode will be 3, 4, and 5. The next episode will be 6, 7, and 8. We're going to try to get that one posted before episodes 9 and 10 release on Sunday. Today is Friday, May 15th, so that means the last 2 episodes will be airing this Sunday, and I'm really, really excited for this. And I really wanted to do something different from the first episode that I did about The Last Dance, just because I felt like I could have talked about more. So because of that, and not to mention the fact that we show a lot of love to Chicago, that's because we're from Chicago, and I felt like this was the perfect time to really kind of really analyze and focus in and really understand everything about this historical Bulls team. This is one of the greatest teams of all time, one of the greatest dynasties of all time, so this is, I felt that it was a personal responsibility for me to really kind of understand and know about, these Bulls, which is why I have refrained from doing a Jordan and LeBron debate. That's coming soon, though. Once we start getting guests back on the show, we're going to start getting back into those conversations, the debates. With everything going on right now, we kind of just want to be really, really safe about everything. But we're going to try to do the videos, maybe some phone calls. We're going to try to figure something out. But definitely stay tuned, because we have some really good stuff coming. Now, and like I said earlier about the apology, I just want to say, I apologize because there's been a delay in the episodes, and that's just because of school. But now that school is finished, we are done with finals. The podcast has 110% of my dedication, so let's jump in. If you guys see these notes, I spent a lot of time rewatching these episodes, really to get into it and kind of know exactly what to talk about. And so for episode 3, the Dennis Rodman episode, I personally really appreciated this, just because it takes us back into his story, his past. And so far through the first 8 episodes, the documentary has done an amazing job, in my opinion, on really kind of going back and highlighting the backstories of really the pivotal pieces to this organization at the time, with Phil Jackson, Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan, Dennis Rodman. It's really, really, really fun to see. The Tony Kukoc, we'll get into that later too. But I really loved seeing it. This was something that, like I said earlier, being from Chicago, this was the time I had to really, truly learn about everything, and in just a short few weeks. This documentary takes us from 1984 to 1998. So it tells us everything, and I really, really, really appreciated this episode, especially too. Rodman is one of the most infamous players of all time, I guess you could say, in a good and a bad way. Being a part of the Bad Boy Pistons, the hair, the piercings, the clothes. I mean, Dennis Rodman was a wild card. He was a wild card, but he was also one of the greatest rebounders and defenders of all time. So this, I thought that this episode really kind of showed his greatness, and I really like that, because it's not always about Michael and Scottie, it's not always about Phil. Dennis Rodman was a key piece to that 95 through 98 teams, so let's jump in. And the first thing I want to say is, one of the first scenes we kind of see in the episode is when Rodman comes into Jordan's hotel room and doesn't really say much, but Jordan knows he's apologizing, and Rodman kind of understands at this point really how much Mike needs him and how much, of an important piece of the team he is. And he really fed off that. And you could tell by, the style of his play. He was an exceptional player. He played really aggressively on the floor, hungry all the time. We see the iconic, pictures of him, laying out for, a ball going out and, out of bounds. And we've seen that multiple times. We see that in the documentary. There's multiple times where he's doing it, hustling, and his energy was unmatched on that Bulls team, and they needed it, and I think one of the biggest takeaways, in my opinion, was definitely the fact that he was part of the Bad Boy Pistons team. And I think that just because there's always this idea that when it comes to the Bulls and the Bad Boy Pistons, it's never going to work. And when Rodman came in, we'll get into, the introductions to, some of the players and coaches a little bit later. But when Rodman came in, he fit right in. He fit like a hand in a glove, as Scotty said, in the documentary. So it was really, really, really fun to see, I think, in my opinion, just how they welcomed him and how, with that first season with the Bulls, they won 72 games. So, but the documentary also talks about, on a more serious note, his suicide attempt that eventually led to him being traded to the San Antonio Spurs. And that's when the Rodman that we know today started to come out. He started dyeing his hair, getting tattoos, piercings, and, he started dating Madonna. This guy, he was living life, and he was doing what he wanted to do. And, that made him happy. He said in an interview, and I think that's really, really important for athletes in general, not just basketball players, but do what you want to do and be happy, I think that's the most important part, especially with athletes around the world. Especially in the NBA, we saw a lot of it, starting to come out, depression, anxiety, all of these things that can happen, especially being on the road and not sleeping as much. And, there's so much that goes into it. I think that it's 2020. Athletes should be happy. They're regular people too. They're just really good at sports. So I think that we need to focus on keeping our athletes happy. Or athletes need to, we kind of have to take a priority on ourselves, sometimes. So I really thought that, this story about Dennis Rodman really kind of foreshadowed the future. Players want to do what they want to do. They want to be happy, and that's important in today's game, and that's been important for the last 30 years. So I really loved seeing that. I really think that, with everything going on, Dennis Rodman, the last 2 years, I believe, with the Pistons, he still led the league in rebounding. His 2 seasons with San Antonio, he led the league in rebounding, and then continued that streak with the Chicago Bulls during their second three-peat. So, this guy, with everything going on around him, the lifestyle that he lived, nothing fazed him. He was still able to perform at the highest level of his game because he was able to do all the things he wanted to do. And I really, really loved seeing that, and I loved that the documentary was able to highlight on that. Next thing I would say, my favorite part of this episode was how they used Jerry Krause to say how he wanted nothing to do with Rodman, and then Phil saying the first meeting was awful, only for the Bulls to, like I said earlier, win 72 games, and then Scotty say he fit like a hand in a glove, and Jerry Krause was saying that, it wouldn't be it wouldn't be possible without Phil Jackson. It wouldn't be possible without Michael Jordan and without Scottie Pippen. There is a certain amount of structure, and I agree to this 100%. I think that San Antonio, where he started acting out, there wasn't as much structure, obviously, as there is now in the Spurs organization. But the structure that was in Chicago with those three, Jerry Reinsdorf and the front office at that time, I think that the structure there, it was amazing. It was the perfect atmosphere for a player like Dennis Rodman, who is more, known as a wild card, for him to come in and fit, So this was something that really kind of was able to really kind of happen by luck, This is, you don't always get a Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and a Phil Jackson, to kind of lead your team. So I think that the fact that this documentary was able to really, really highlight that, I love that, and it's so contradictory because, seeing how Jerry Krause says this and then the players say a different thing. I love that, especially because Jerry Krause is always, we talked about in the first and second episode reaction, but Jerry Krause has always been an issue. And, so we got to see that part. I love that part about that episode as well. He brought an edge to that Bulls team that they never had. I mean, Horace Grant was a great player. Don't get me wrong. I think Horace Grant was a great player. Might even be a better overall all-around player than Dennis Rodman. But I think overall the energy and the edge and the competitiveness from Dennis Rodman really was able to complete that that second three-peat run Bulls team. And, now with everything going on during the 97-98 season, Scottie sitting out because of injury and MJ getting questioned about retirement daily. I mean, Rodman was a person that Jordan had really, really, truly started to depend on. And, there was good and bad moments with this. And the good moments were when Scottie was out and, Rodman felt that it was Michael and him. And it was just them two leading the way and everything was going to be okay between them. Once Scottie kind of came back into the picture, things started to, I think things started to kind of unravel. And Dennis in the documentary had said that he needed a vacation. And he went up to Phil Jackson and told him that he needed a vacation. I guess he felt that with Scottie coming back, he felt that he was the third wheel of the of the group. So he asked for a vacation. They tell Mike, and he wants to go let loose in Vegas for just 2 days. But it's Dennis Rodman, so we kind of know what happened there. I mean, he ended up being, I believe, he was gone for 4 days. 48 hours. He had his fun, and at the time he was with Carmen Electra, and Michael had to go all the way to Vegas, pick him up, get him out of bed, and I think that just seeing all of this, this whole backstory about Dennis Rodman and the way he fit in with this Chicago Bulls team, and he was an outsider. His personality made him an outsider, his actions made him an outsider, but he fit like a hand in a glove. And, overall, my favorite part of episode 3 was really kind of when Rodman broke down rebounding, and he made it seem like an art. I mean, the way he was so detailed about learning how to read the ball off of the rim, and the angles and the trajectory and everything that kind of he said in like a 2-minute span of rebounding was just, in my personal opinion, I think that was my favorite part of the entire episode. Now let's go and move on to episode 4. That I believe I jumped ship a little bit and started talking about it, but episode 4 did lead up to him missing that 48-hour deadline, and then he's on the trip with Vegas with Carmen Electra, and then Jordan had to go back and get him, bring him back to Chicago. One of the funniest moments, I would say, was when they have practice and they're trying to get Dennis back in shape, and Phil calls the Indian drill, and Jordan talks about it, and Kurt talks about it, and they have to, someone from the back of the line has to run all the way to the front, and Jordan says, everybody keep it at a jog. I didn't go on a vacation. Why do I have to run? So next thing you know, Dennis Rodman is running circles around them, and I thought it was hilarious because he just needed a break. He can live that lifestyle, but he can also still go out there and, do what he does on the basketball court, which I love to see. Love that he had that kind of in-your-face mentality about it. I loved seeing that about him. But I really, really did also love how they segued into the Phil Jackson portion of episode 4, after opening with the Dennis Rodman situation. I really love that they were able to, highlight the connection between Dennis Rodman and Phil Jackson through, Native American tribes. So I believe that Phil Jackson had said that he would be a backward walker, and someone who does things different. And that is exactly what Dennis Rodman was. He was someone who does things different, but he still was able to get a job done. But then it shifts over into Phil Jackson, and I mean, his whole mentality was to be focused and to play as one. And I thought that was really important, because I feel like we sometimes see that in today's NBA, but there's a lot of times where we don't, because there's a lot of ISO basketball now, a lot of offense, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of pace. I like the Warriors, the Spurs are two of the greatest examples, that come off the top of my head. And, seeing that was really, really, especially from the beginning. I believe he brought yoga, and, he brought yoga to the team. He brought meditating. Like, he brought so many different things that you wouldn't associate with basketball, that he made it different. And that's exactly why, he's Zen Master Phil. But I think that when you were able to see that was another way that we were able to see how he was able to connect with his players and really, build a connection with them, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. And I thought that it was an amazing introduction to the Phil Jackson portion of the episode. He was drafted by the Knicks, and he won 2 championships with the Knicks. I believe in the documentary they compared him to a younger version of Dennis Rodman. If I'm not mistaken, that was his comparison. So I think that, when you were seeing that, and then seeing really how they were able to connect, not as a coach and a player, but as actual great friends, I think that when you see that, and then you see really, what Phil Jackson was about, I think that's great. I think that was great, and that comparison was great. And then he actually started out, this is, like I said, this is an entire learning process for me as well, and I really wanted to kind of note it, because he went to school in Puerto Rico, or not went to school, he coached in Puerto Rico. Then he went and coached the Albany Patroons in the CBA, won a championship. Then he ended up getting a call from Jerry Krause to get a job with the Chicago Bulls. And because he dressed, according to Jerry Krause, like a hippie, he wasn't able to get his job. So seeing that, I believe he was with Stan Albeck, and he just didn't like the fact that he couldn't wear a suit. And I think that really highlighted his whole mentality. He was different. Phil Jackson had a different mindset. He had a different mentality. And I think that was what set him apart as, one of the greatest coaches, if not the greatest coach of all time. The next thing I would probably have to say about this episode was the fact that in the documentary, Doug Collins, they asked Doug Collins why he felt that, or Doug Collins had stated that he felt Phil Jackson could be the coach. And the person interviewing him was asking him why. And he said, I just had a feeling. They said, you don't want to talk about it? He said, I just had a feeling. There's nothing else. And I think that that's kind of weird, I feel like that question brought some tension. I don't want to focus on it too much, but I thought that it did raise some tension in the room with Doug Collins. But his whole mentality from Doug Collins, the offense at least, and defense, it completely switched from Doug Collins giving Michael Jordan the ball and going to him and focusing on him. It completely moved to a point where, Phil Jackson wanted the ball to be in everybody's hand. So the triangle offense. Now, the triangle offense was something, when I was watching this entire documentary, I was really, really interested with that, because it was something that, you've always heard of. And the last time I remember hearing it was when he was the an executive for the Knicks and trying to institute that from the front office position, the triangle offense. And I think that, when we were able to see the way he was able to kind of pick at Tex Winter's mind about the triangle offense and then kind of develop it even more, I thought that was one of my favorite parts of this episode, just because just seeing the way that offense was able to flow, the constant movement and the number of passes that were possible, everything that you saw in that documentary, the way it was explained, it looks amazing. Like when you're watching it, it looks so fluid and it looks so smart, such smart basketball because there's constant movement. I really loved seeing that. And the triangle offense is kind of what helped Scottie Pippen really kind of create that point forward position. And the focus then shifts to the 1990 Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7 to be exact, when the focus is on Scottie Pippen's migraine game. So Scottie Pippen in Game 7 against the Detroit Pistons in 1990, he had a migraine and he couldn't see. At first his vision started out really blurry. He had a headache. He couldn't see at one point, and his stats showed it. It was a rough game for Scottie Pippen that day, and they had to. He already had it hard enough having to guard Dennis Rodman, and not to mention having Dennis Rodman guard him. So it was a tough Game 7, but the Bulls lost. It kind of shifts to the offseason then, when the team comes back more determined than ever and spent an entire offseason putting on muscle and then facing the Pistons, in the Eastern Finals again. The Bulls, they really wanted to step on their throats this time. They didn't want to give them a chance. The Bulls went up 3-0, and then when Rodman fouled Scottie, pushing him down where he could have really actually hurt him, Scottie had no reaction. And everybody on the Pistons starts to say that this is when they knew that they lost the game. It was already in the Bulls' hands, but doing that really kind of just triggered the rest of the Bulls team and fueled Scottie, and he just took off the rest of the game, led the way for the Bulls to get to the finals for the first time, and then we got to see Magic and Mike, and this was something that personally I really love to see. Magic Johnson is one of my favorite players, just to from the videos and everything that I have seen from him, and then seeing Michael Jordan, obviously one of the greatest players, if not the greatest player of all time, going up against him, I thought it was amazing, and we didn't really get to see it in their prime. This is the very late tail end of Magic's career, so we weren't able to see a prime Magic versus a prime Michael, which I think would have been an amazing competition. I think that we got Magic and Bird in their primes. I think if we were able to see Magic and Michael in their primes, that would honestly be some of the best basketball we've probably ever seen, in my opinion. But next up, Scottie was guarding Magic, and he was able to showcase his skills in that 91 finals, putting up his own, being able to hold Magic Johnson. It was a great finals. Jordan finally let his teammates to help him, in Game 5. He allowed Paxson to take open shots, and he started, taking them, making them, and then, Jordan was able to really kind of understand that this is what you need to be a successful team and to win championships. So I really loved seeing that. But my favorite quote from episode 4 was when Phil Jackson said, "The AFC finally won. It seems like times are changing. Seems like things might be changing in the NBA." I think he was right about that one. That was the first of 6 for the Chicago Bulls. So next, then we switch and we go forward back into 1998, and it starts off at the All-Star game. And Kobe Bryant, we see Kobe come in. They have their battle in the 1998 All-Star game. Jordan walks away with an MVP. Now, my thoughts on the Kobe appearance, first of all, rest in peace to Kobe. It was I really loved seeing this. You know, my favorite part was that when Kobe said, "What you get from me is from him," talking about Michael. And I think to me that was the most important part of Kobe's appearance, because we tend to overlook Kobe. You know, whenever we talk about the greatest player of all time, we tend to focus on Michael Jordan. We tend to focus on LeBron James, but we tend to overlook, Kobe Bryant. And I think that the reason that is because, you know, he said it himself. What you get from him is from MJ. You know, so I think that Kobe Bryant, his appearance in this documentary, and Michael Jordan's, you know, the significance of Michael Jordan to Kobe Bryant throughout his entire career. I thought that, you know, this documentary, in the short time that Kobe was on screen, I thought that they did an amazing job of doing that, really kind of highlighting the role of being a big brother for Michael Jordan to Kobe Bryant. By far one of, if not my favorite moments from that entire episode. Honestly, it was a great moment to watch, you know, seeing Kobe. I believe too that Kobe portion of the documentary I think they had said that it just finished filming, I think a week or two before he passed. So that's tough to hear, but overall, I think that was one of my favorite, like I said, if not my favorite moment from the entire documentary. Just seeing really that how critical Michael Jordan was to Kobe Bryant's game. It was amazing to see. But then we're going to keep going into episode 5, where Jordan laced up an old pair of Jordan 1s to play his last game at the Garden after the All-Star game, and shifts back to 1984, and then he talks to Jordan's shoe deal. Now, the Jordan shoe deal. This, guys, if you've never seen them, or if you don't have them, this is, in my opinion, the most iconic Jordan, maybe shoe even of all time. The Jordan 1s, that's the ones, like I said, he wore in his last game. On feet today, we got the Breads that he wore in, I believe, the 1997 finals, or the 1996 finals. 1996 finals. So really kind of, we're going all out. Like I said, we got to show some love to our city. So, but he didn't want to go to Nike. He really didn't. And as crazy as it sounds, Nike was the brand that allowed him to really kind of create his own, be his own. And Converse had an all-star lineup with, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and guys like that. And Adidas really wanted him. He really wanted to go to Adidas. Adidas wanted him, but they said that at the time they couldn't make it work. Nike paid a rookie who had not played in the NBA $250,000. And his agent has to be a genius. This guy got him a shoe deal, a $250,000 shoe deal for a rookie, and got him a signature shoe. That's, like I said, that's where we get the Jordan 1 from. We got our other one up there. But, the original goal, let's look at these numbers. The original goal after 4 years was $3 million worth of shoes. Year 1, Nike sold $126 million. That just shows the Jordan effect is for real. So then Nike ended up tapping Spike Lee for the Air Jordan commercials, and it was a hit. It really kind of took off, and I really, really loved some of the ideas in the commercials. That one where someone is riding down a street or a sidewalk, and he runs over his shoes, and he's like, "Man, you just stepped all over my all-white Jordans. And I just bought these." And I don't know. I just thought that Spike Lee brought this vision to Air Jordan, and him with Michael. His background and his Hollywood background and Jordan's iconic status. The two of them just really, really worked really well together. So I thought that was really, really great to see, and that's where we get the phrase, "It's gotta be the shoes." So I loved seeing that. And I loved how they kind of were able to, fit that in a way where it didn't take away from the main story, and it added to it. So I really, really loved that part of the documentary, this episode at least. But then the focus then shifts back to the 92 finals where the Bulls faced Portland and Jordan torches Drexler. I believe he had 5 threes and a half. And then when you think about it, 5 threes and a half does not sound anywhere near as bad as, what we get in today's NBA. Some of the players we got now put up at least 10 to 15 threes a game in some cases, So I think that seeing that and hearing that at least kind of just highlights just the change in pace and style of basketball from the 90s to now. So I thought that was really cool to see, though. Jordan absolutely hated the comparison between him and Clyde Drexler. And rightfully so. I mean, I don't believe that Clyde Drexler belongs in the conversation with Michael Jordan. Even though they played the same position, I think that Michael Jordan is up there. He's way up there above Clyde Drexler. So, and he showed him. He showed him really why he thought that himself too. So, but then he was able to finally capture the back-to-back championships to be on the same level as Bird and Magic, but he needed one more. They didn't get 3, so he wanted to get one more. But before he was able to do that, he had to be a part of the 1992 Olympics and be a part of the Dream Team. And right when we shift into that sequence in the documentary, we kind of start to see Jordan getting ready for an interview, and the first thing he says is no Isaiah Thomas questions. Now, do I want to get into the beef? Not really, just because of the fact that there's so much to talk about. But do I believe Michael Jordan had a say-so in Isaiah Thomas's placement on the team? Yes. I think he had a say-so just because of all the other players and the chemistry that was already on the team. Do I believe if he had maybe, hey, do you want this guy or Isaiah? Maybe he might say this person because they fit. But personally, I don't think Michael was going to be the person to just go out there and say it. But you never know. I do see the rest of the team, and I do think that Isaiah Thomas maybe doesn't fit well because of the other problems with other players. So I think that all of that combined with the fact that Michael Jordan doesn't like him was a deciding factor. So I don't think that there was necessarily a grudge held, but I do think that the players' past experiences with Isaiah Thomas definitely did have an impact on the decision to keep him from the team. But then we shift into one of the rumored greatest scrimmages of all time, and we were able to get to see it finally, and we saw Team Jordan versus Team Magic, and Magic Johnson. One of my favorite quotes of the documentary, actually we'll get to my favorite one of this documentary episode, was, if you don't turn into Air Jordan, I'm going to blow you out. And what did he do? Magic said, man, why did I say that for? And next thing you know, Jordan, I believe he said they were down 8, scored the next 3 baskets to tie the game up, and then just wins the game for them. I mean, my favorite quote, though, from episode 5 of the Last Dance documentary is definitely, Michael, game on the line. Who takes the last shot? Me. It's a dumb question. And I just thought that when he answered that question, me personally, that was my favorite quote, just because that dream team with the caliber of players, I mean, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Scottie Pippen, Charles Barkley, David Robinson, Chris Mullin. I mean, this team was stacked. And at the end of the day, Jordan rose above the rest, and he wasn't wrong. I mean, when he said he's still taking that last shot, he's not wrong. He's not wrong. I 100% agree. And I think that one being my favorite quote is his. Throughout this entire documentary, I believe that we see something in Michael Jordan that we really don't see in NBA players today. And their mentality, his mentality to win at all costs is undeniable. It's undeniably undefeated. I mean, I think Kobe Bryant maybe has the next best, mentality when it comes to it. But I really just genuinely think that Michael Jordan really truly embodies competition. And we'll talk about, his competition problem that he says himself. We'll talk about that later, but I really just think that, the mindset that this man has when it came to the game of basketball, it was undefeated. And it wasn't because of his skill that he beat you. It was because of his will. So I really loved seeing that throughout the entire documentary. And really, like I said, this is my favorite quote because it highlights his entire mentality. No matter who else is there, he's the best player in the game. So now during the Olympics, during the 1992 Olympics, there was a lot of questions around the next best team, which was Croatia, because Croatia had a young guy, star going by the name of Toni Kukoc that Jerry Krause absolutely loved. And the Bulls hated it. I mean, they hated it. So because Krause was drooling over Kukoc, it rubbed players the wrong way, but it also gave Jordan and Pippen fuel to go after him during their first matchup in the 1992 Olympics. So then we got to see, we really got to see, that team win the championship, and the way that game played out. Obviously, Toni Kukoc had a little bit of a better game in Game 5. In the second game of the Olympics. But I think that really kind of getting to see that part where Jordan was, at this point, he had already been with Nike for years, and the way he covered the Reebok logo with the flag on the USA jackets, because it wasn't Nike. That was, I don't know why, but I really, really liked that, just because he didn't want to let anyone other than his team win, and seeing that Reebok wasn't his team, Nike was his team. He was obviously Team USA, but Nike was his team. That's his brand. And he did not want to go out and endorse another brand. And I think that when he did that on the highest stage, that set, a statement, for athletes. And I think, like I said earlier, I might have said this earlier, really the Dream Team put basketball on the global stage and really kind of transformed basketball to, basketball is I believe at this point in time more diverse than it's ever been. And I think that that's because of the 1992 Dream Team and Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson and that team over there. And, basketball is all over the world. It's one of the most popular sports in the world now. And I really thought, the shoes, the commercials, it was everywhere. Basketball players were everywhere. Michael Jordan was everywhere. And really, that's really kind of what changed the game, in my opinion. But lastly, from episode 5, they discuss a little bit of politics. And Jordan comes out and says, Republicans wear sneakers too, when they ask him to endorse a Democrat politician at the time. I don't want to get too much into the politics about it, but there was a lot of backlash because people started to, view Jordan as he wanted himself to win. He wanted, Nike to win only, and really kind of didn't help, his community, I guess. I believe at the time, the Republican was a white man and the Democrat was a African American man, and there was, with Jordan said, look, I'm not going to endorse somebody because you guys want me to. I don't know him, and I think that Jordan, yes, it looked bad for him at the time, but he didn't want to get involved with politics, and you can't blame him because Barack Obama said it himself in the documentary as well. But for a guy who's still trying to handle everything and figure everything out, what do you want him to do? So I think that there was so much going on in these last 3 episodes. You guys saw my notes. We had a lot. But we got through everything, and that is the first of this weekend's upcoming episodes. I thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of Figures of Sport.